one of the things that I think gets overlooked is, work ethic. One of the things that you brought up, you said, if she has my work ethic, she'll be successful, and it's one of the things that I think we're going to get into it as I really start to get into the interview with you. But one of the things that I feel blessed being an entrepreneur is to be able to work with my kids and let them work around my work ethic and learn that work ethic so it actually gets passed down. It's something that I feel so blessed with owning my own businesses like you do, and being able to figure out, which one of my kids is going to run with a certain business, which is something you're doing also. Because this is another thing that only in this country can you plan for that with your kids, and be able to teach a work ethic, which this is something that can't be taught in school or in college. This has to be learned because you're working along someone with a work ethic, so.
Absolutely. And it's minimized, right? And when it comes to, work ethic, and people say, oh, you know what, my kid really works hard in school, so I'm not going to make them work. Poor little Julia, she works so hard to get A's in school. Or gosh, she's an athlete, so she's in sports, so she shouldn't have to work. She works hard in sports. That's all great. That does mean a lot, right? If kids have to work hard for those things, but actually working with your hands or working with your brain to understand how to create a value for others, man, that's the best. And if you can teach your kids that at a young age, boy, they're going to have an unfair advantage. And I use that term a lot. I talk about unfair advantages in my life, right? And unfair advantage to me wasn't my white privilege, right? It was 100% raised with two parents that loved me, right? It was 100% being raised in America. It was marrying a great woman that became somebody I wanted, that inspired me to try to do the best I could in business and raising my family and all that. And then eventually my faith, right? My faith came through that as well. So there's unfair advantages in life, but one of them is actually a kid understanding the value at a young age, as young as possible, in my opinion. I don't care if it's 8, 9, 10 years old. Heck, I know people that started working at 5, 6 years old with their family, right? For me, it was 10 years old. I started working around my dad, and then got a newspaper route and so on, right? So for me, it was a young age that I understood that the dignity of work, the fun of actually working and then making something, whether it's the $6 a week I made, delivering newspapers and the tips I had at the end of the week, or it was a lawn mowing jobs, for me to have that cash in my pocket earned by my hard work, man, that was the best feeling I could have. And that it started there. And then from there on, a few years, let's say 13, 14 years old, we lived in a lower income area. A cottage turned into a full-time home. But man, I knew for the rest of my life, I would always have a job. I'd always have money in my pocket because I knew that I knew how to make money back then, right? And so the confidence of being self-sufficient and the dignity of work is a huge thing that many people don't understand the importance of, in my opinion. Right? These are my opinions, but I believe there's much more people, young people today, that don't understand the importance of the dignity of work, to have a job to be self-sufficient. And my kids, I had this kind of nightmare in my head back when my kids were young, that they would grow up to be lazy, dependent of me or others, right? And so I had my kids working at very young ages, and I know how I worked when I was a kid, and people looked at me back then, or my dad, he was abusive because he worked us a lot. And I know that when my son, I had him working a lot, people would look at me even 20 years ago now, right? He's 33 now, 20 years ago, saying, that kid works too much. He shouldn't have to work so hard, right? And so, but today my kids are self-sufficient. If something happens to me, something happens to my business, no doubt in my mind, they'll go out and they'll get a great job, or they'll start their own business all over again because they have all the tools that it takes to do that, right? So my comfort in my life is, hey, you know what? I can take risk. I may lose it all again, and I've done it already, right? I may lose it all again. If I do, my kids are going to be fine, right? And that's a great feeling.
Well, Gary, so I was actually just on a green industry podcast yesterday, and the person asked me, what are the 3 things that makes me most successful? And you just hit on a few things that I just want to bring up. And then I'm going to let you explain to my listeners about all your businesses, because I know who Gary Rabine is, but the listeners don't yet. But, you know, one of the things first, I worked with my dad when I was 12 years old, you know, so the whole thought of you're working them too hard. My mom and dad said you have a choice. You can stay home and wash dishes with your sister and vacuum, or you can go work with dad. I was like, I'm working with dad. There's a lot of windshield time there. I can talk to my dad. I can learn from my dad. I would go and work with my dad. But it's what got me in the industry. My dad was a union laborer, you know, and doing some side work. You asked me the first time we met where the name Langton Group came. As a matter of fact, to the audience, the first time I met Gary, he saw one of my robots outside my house. You may not even remember this, Gary. And you said, hey, that robot's pretty cool. I need one on my golf course. And did you steal that name Langton Group from my company, Rabine Group? Okay, and it made me laugh because actually my dad had a company called The Langton Group. And when I started Langton Group, I had to take the off just so that I could incorporate in Illinois. But I did it because I wanted to show my dad how I could grow his dream of The Langton Group. He just never did it. He had 5 kids, real conservative guy. But you know, one of the things that I always got from my parents was, if you treat people right, they will always come back. And you can look at this at employees or customers. If you treat your customers right, they're always going to come back to you. And if you treat your employees right, they're always going to stay. And these are things that you just can't learn in school. These are things you have to learn from people that you look up to in your life. And when you talk about your kids being set up with all the right tools to succeed, if something happens to you, I feel the same way. You know, if I teach my kids how to treat people, then if something happens to me, they're always going to treat people right. And whether they start their own business or work for someone else, they're either going to treat their boss right, they're going to treat their customer right. I say all the time, even when you have your own business, you have a bunch of bosses. Your customers are really your boss. Like they want something, you know? And I always tell people, don't call me your boss, call me your leader. Like I'm not your boss, I'm your leader, you know? So anyways, but to not get sidetracked right out of the gate, because I want people to truly know Gary Rabine. So I want to get started with, how did Gary Rabine, in your opinion, you know, starting from the beginning, you've already kind of hit on it a little bit, get to the point where you're at, and if you have any past jobs, okay, that kind of define you, you know, you like for me, I looked at certain jobs or certain people I worked for, and I said, when I lead, I want to lead this way.